All right, well, let's see. Let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Name is Gabrial Mont-Reynaud. Welcome to our uh, farmers meeting. Um, we're going to kind of keep it short. Everybody's got some commitments at 7 o'clock, so we're going to have a hard stop at 7. So um, today's my day to have a presentation, and I have a guest speaker with me. We work together in Atlanta. And right now we're currently collaborating on an aquaponics system, commercial sized here in the downtown Atlanta area. So we're currently engaged with another group to help us with that endeavor for the placement of the building. So uh, individual's name is Kamau Franklin. He's the owner and the individual that runs the Community Movement Builders nonprofit organization here in Atlanta. And he's doing some fantastic work for the residents of the Pittsburgh area. It's right below south of the Atlanta metro area. Does a lot of work with gentrification. I work with him primarily through the gardening efforts and the aquaponic efforts. So without further ado, Kamau, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell the group a little bit more about what you guys do here in Atlanta with the Community Movement Builders.
Sure will. I mean, I feel like some of you folks I recognize, so I hope I won't be boring you by repeating information that some of you may already know. But for new folks, it's good to see you and hear from you. So my name is Kamau Franklin. Just a slight correction. So I'm not the owner because it's a nonprofit 501c3 organization. So I am the founder, and we have a board, and I am the director. And I should also state we have chapters in Detroit, Dallas, New Orleans, and San Diego. And we actually, this week, will probably be announcing a new chapter in Memphis, Tennessee. Our organization is a community organizing organization, and I would say we also do sustainable development as our two main work areas. And as Gabriel mentioned, in terms of community organizing, the main focus that we've been involved in over the last 3 or 4 years has been anti-gentrification work here in Southwest Atlanta. As folks probably know, Southwest Atlanta is one of the last working class Black neighborhoods left in Atlanta. Most of the other Black communities in Atlanta have sort of been scattered or displaced or outright gentrified. And we are fighting hard in this particular community to organize with the residents of the community to keep this neighborhood Black. And we're doing so by various methods and means. One is doing sort of yard sign placements and petition drives, actually doing rallies and demos, working with the neighborhood organization. So part of that work is to work with people who are tenants and owners to continue to build in that work, and also to get them to start thinking about how we can collectively purchase property and use that property to develop land trust, to keep housing stable in that community, as well as creating other sources for us to, let's say, stabilize the community through what I would call, again, the second part of our work, sustainable development. And what that means, we do a lot of work around food issues and cooperatives. So we also are the caretakers of a neighboring community garden, and across the street from where we're at, we own a lot that we're also doing farming on. And so these are small sized initiatives, relatively speaking, but we're hoping to use these initiatives to help build out for bigger projects. And a couple of the bigger projects that we do are farmers market in the community, and that farmers market works in a housing complex. And it works in a housing complex for older folks and for folks on fixed incomes. And every summer, what we've been doing is providing, relatively speaking, inexpensive produce and groceries for people in that neighborhood. During this current COVID crisis, we've done what we call mutual aid, which is delivering food stock and toiletries to people in the neighborhood. And so far, we've delivered uh, over 150 packages to people in the community. And we also have a program called the Community Stabilization Fund, where we give people grants of up to $500 to help pay rent and utility bills and even part of their mortgages and or taxes during this time period. And so we also are developing with that farmers market different cooperative enterprises. Gabriel spoke to one of them, the aquaponics system that we're building, which is a connection with you guys also. But we're also doing a kale chip company, which I've talked to a couple of people online about already, which is supplemented from the kale chips the kale that we grow in our garden. That's another area with doing some sea moss product development. So CMOS obviously is something that's become bigger in our community over the last few years. And we are starting to do some distribution and working with another group around developing a cooperative over that. And so we are ultimately, and we're also doing a food cooperative, which is going to develop out of our uh, uh, um, I'm trying to mutual aid work that we're doing. So we're going to go from giving people free groceries to developing a food cooperative where people put something in, they do some work, and then they continue to get produce that we either get from wholesale and supplement from our garden. And so for us, building these small enterprises and hoping some of them get a little bigger is a way of trying to develop alternative economic systems. And I should also say, out of the food co-op, we hope to have a grocery store, a cooperative grocery store over the next 3 or 4 years. So this is the work that we're doing and hoping to lead to some institution building in the community that is Black owned, Black run, and Black directed, and operates again in a cooperative form so that there are multiple owners and that the stakeholders in the community are the very people who are the owners. And that's what we think is what particularly our working class and poor communities need to sustain ourselves. So I'll stop there, but we've been around for about 3 or 4 years of organizing. We're starting to do similar work in Detroit. And some of our other chapters are doing other kinds of work, but most of us are picking up on this idea around food sustainability as a long-term kind of organizing way to make sure that our communities start to sort of turn around and we start to have the needed ownership and control over institutions. Because as we can see from this latest crisis, that if we don't own the institutions in our community, that goes from the businesses to those who run the police stations, to those who are part of the city council, to our schools, we are always going to be subject to somebody else's whims, ideologies, their thinking process, in short, white supremacy that will have rule and run over our folks. So our long-term goals are to figure out what methods and means makes the most sense for us to have control over these institutions, develop new institutions, so that we can do a better job, collectively speaking, in having ownership over our daily lives. So I'll stop there as a start.
I'm going to say thank you very much for that the information. I would say that food security plays a big role in that as well, keeping the communities intact and self-sufficient. I think that came to head, especially in this COVID-19. Although people were scrambling for toilet paper and such, and sanitizing wipes, the next epidemic or pandemic, if it hits the food supply, everybody's not going to be as nice as they were, just because it's going to be food that we're going to be fighting over, and not toilet paper.
Yeah.
So
and I'll add quickly that most of the food that we get, we source from local suppliers, whether or not they're folks who have larger farms than we do. There's a organization called Truly Living Well that has larger farms in East Point and another place in Atlanta, College Park in Atlanta. So we source from locally owned, Black-owned businesses and/or other nonprofits, and then we supplement from there.
Fantastic. I did have a question on the chat that someone wanted to know if you could expound a little bit more on how to create those cooperative enterprises. Could you?
Sure. And as we've probably discussed before, as you folks already know, So different states have different laws around cooperatives. In Georgia, per se, they don't have any law governing how to develop a cooperative. And basically, a cooperative is a structure, a business structure. So what we do, and what a lot of folks do in places that don't have direct kind of cooperative legal structures, like a regular corporation, a B Corp, an A Corp, a LLC, is that we form LLCs basically. And so LLCs, as folks know, is not about stocks, but it's about percentage of ownership in members. So these LLCs form the basis for developing cooperative ownership. So basically, we work with folks who are either working on the project directly, and so they are the workers on the project, as in the kale chips, people who are growing the kale, and that includes young people in our youth program, some people who conceptually came up with the idea, and some folks who have been helping to market the idea and expand upon it. So it's about 8 or 9 owners to begin with, and we use that as the basis to develop this system that is that is controlled by a group of folks as opposed to 1 or 2 people. And with that, when there are profits made, they don't go back directly to the let's say the CEO. They go back to all the owners in a cooperative. And why it's important is, as a business like that expands and becomes a more solid worker cooperative, because it's hiring more people to produce the actual formula, to distribute the formula, to package the formula. After a year, those folks can become owners. And so this cooperative structure starts to expand and becomes a democratic structure in which people get to vote on what they are doing in terms of their workplace conditions, hours, pay, benefits. All that stuff starts to come into play. And again, instead of having sort of a corporate head or corporate boss that gets to make these decisions become democratic decisions by the workers. Now, depending on how big a cooperative gets, some cooperatives actually hire managers, people who have experience managing businesses, to do the day-to-day work. Membership on larger issues around direction that a business may have. And so that starts to happen again when a cooperative becomes too big, or not too big, becomes bigger. And then there's many worker owners, but you can't make sort of direct decision making in that way anymore, because you just have 50 or 75 people in a room. And obviously day-to-day decisions need to sometimes be farmed out to somebody who has a history in terms of that kind of business, and is hired actually to do that on a day-to-day basis. So that's the the basic elements of making cooperatives work.
Fantastic. How do you where do you get most of your funding from?
Our funding is divided into several areas. We get some small grants from foundations in a range of 10, 15, 20,000. We get individual donations. We've gotten individual donations as high as 25. No, I guess in terms of the actual community house we own, we've had donations as high as $100,000 when we first started. We've had 10,000, 5,000, that kind of thing. We get smaller individual donations, which sort of sustains us as $10 a month members. We probably have about 75 to 100 of those now. And then people who give individual donations that are one time. And so those are the main ways right now. And obviously for us, we're hoping to develop the cooperatives. And as we develop the cooperatives, our desire is that those will be other sources of revenue, which will help us in terms of directing our businesses. Directing our businesses and bringing additional revenues that we can use. Because for us, it's important not to be dependent on foundation resources, because we do consider ourselves somewhat of a radical organization. So we don't want anybody sort of stopping us from implementing our ideas, how we talk about our ideas, what we think is good for our larger community. And when you have too much foundation money, or it's coming from one direct source, they begin to play a role, or could play a role, in what your voice is and how you decide to distribute your resources or talk about your work. So we try to avoid that.
Oh, okay. That's great. So what about engaging like local government? Is that a difficult task to do, or do you find that there's a lot of resistance from local governments with what you're trying to do, stopping gentrification? Do they kind of turn a blind eye to it, or do you find that you need to get the community involved with voting for somebody that is, say, more in tune with what gentrification means to the Black community?
I think for us, there's several levels of our interaction with city government in Atlanta. You know, when we make a statement and we do it in front of public officials or it catches someone's eye because we have these yard signs, what's happened in the recent past is that we've actually had some public officials schedule meetings with us. And for us, it feels like they are having an actual.
Now you turn on mute somehow.
Can you hear me?
There you go. There you go. We lost about 5 seconds of what you were saying.
Somebody tried to call in, I think that's why.
Oh, okay.
I was saying that when we interact with government officials, it feels like they are trying to feel us out, right? They are trying to see how serious we are, what our numbers look like, what our final objectives are. And so that becomes like this sort of dance and interplay of whether or not we are going to play nice with the city or whether or not we are going to put the city, um, uh, hold it up as a group that we need to fight. And normally we hold it up as a group that is responsible, particularly in Atlanta, and I think this is true everywhere. We're actually responsible for a lot of the gentrification that is happening because they've set the policies. They've gone in, let's say they've gotten to bed with the real estate industry. They have devoted to sort of corporate largesse and big corporate projects that actually push people out of their communities and cities. So it's hard for us to suggest that the city is an actual ally because the city, and again in Atlanta, has been governed by Black mayors for now 50 years. And during that time period, the Black population in Atlanta has decreased exponentially. The poverty rates in Atlanta for Black people are still higher than, it's not even still higher, but even higher than they were 50 years ago compared vis-a-vis the white folks. Social mobility is one of the worst in the nation. So this idea that we have a Black mecca is undercut by the fact that just because we have some celebrities and or some people who work in government offices who do make some good salaries, and we have a somewhat of a middle class, still the vast majority of Black people who live in Atlanta are working class and poor. And so, yes, part of our strategy ultimately is to run candidates from the local community and to try to have those candidates have a more radical stance and challenge the folks that we think are actually participating in this gentrification. And we also work on the state level with other organizations around policy initiatives that will bring more affordable housing to our communities. But we want to stress that we think those things only are supplemented by the amount of community organizing that we are able to do in our neighborhoods.
I will say that I think at one point you had a fairly high profile candidate visitor location. Is that correct? I forget the candidate's name.
Well, repeat that again. You broke up a little bit.
I was saying I recall you guys have a very high profile candidate. I don't remember his name though.
If I can know, if for some reason you're breaking up on my line, I'm not sure that's anybody else's. But we work. I'll jump in a little bit and say we work with various candidates and already folks who are elected officials, both in Atlanta and nationally, because we consider ourselves a national organization. What we want to do is to work in different areas, particularly at a local area, and develop what we call a Black political club. And out of that Black political club, we begin to not only train and run candidates, but start to endorse those other candidates who we think hold a similar line that we do. We're developing a platform that we call a Black liberation platform, because I think a lot of times, over the last 20 or 30 years, in particular, we now have Black elected officials who like to say that they don't know what a Black agenda is anymore, right? Or what's good for working class people. It's going to be naturally good for Black people. And so some of that is true, but it doesn't go far enough, right? It doesn't go far enough in addressing our individual concerns as a community. And so we have to make sure that folks who represent us actually are folks who we think hold the same values that we do around our liberation as a people.
Great. I guess before I open it up for questions, I was curious to know what defined the area for you guys to create a chapter. So you say you have like 4 or 5 chapters, right, in different states
And I saw someone ask
or
a
different
question.
cities.
Yeah.
Is there a specific criteria you look for in order to establish the chapter there, or any?
So again, you're breaking up for me, but I think I heard your question. What is the criteria for starting chapters in different places? So we have an organizing manual, or orientation manual, I should say, that specifies for us what it means to have a chapter. And that usually means starting off with at least 5 people who want to join an organization. They go through political education, which means us talking about, obviously, the politics of our organization, what we consider Black liberation to be, what is sort of the line of thought and history that we think our organization either comes from or is the line that we are most in favor of pursuing in terms of our own history as a people and struggle. Um, and then that chapter is on probation for 6 months. We help develop that chapter's work program, fundraising apparatus, and so forth. And then after that 6 months, as long as everything goes correctly, that chapter becomes a standing chapter within the organization. And I think someone asked if we could share organizational documents. I thought I saw that, and that's a yes. If anyone's interested in seeing anything from some of the LLC documentation, cooperatives, our actual 501c3 paperwork and mission and so forth, our organizing manual or orientation manual, all those things I'll gladly share with Gabriel, and he can share that out with everybody else.
Fantastic. I really appreciate you, Kamau, for coming on. I'm going to open it up the floor for questions. Then I have a question that hasn't been
Yep, I do. Yeah, thanks for coming on, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Good. Yeah, so I had a question concerning the grants and the eligibility, and which is, okay. That was somebody. So yeah, it's definitely that seems like that's pretty good. My question is, with the grants, how many times can a family be awarded that grant, and how many times can the family be awarded the grant? One, and yeah, that was it. That was a question.
What we do with the Community Stabilization Fund is, at first, when we started, and we actually started it before the COVID crisis, we started as part of our anti-identification work. And when we started it was that you can apply. It's a 1-page application, doesn't ask a lot of questions. We pay the resources directly to the utility company or the mortgage company. And so what we started doing was they can apply once a year. Now, post the COVID, we've opened that back up and said households can apply more than once. But what we ask is if they do apply more than once, then if they participate in some sort of community event with us, and so that they can show some support for the organization.
Yeah, I have something else I want to tag on to that. Here, I don't know. Do you all? This is a question, and do you all have anything that once they receive that grant? For example, years and years ago, there was a Salvation Army that would help people once a year, and basically pay the light bill, pay the water bill, similar to what you're doing. But at the end of the day, the families continue to repeat. some of them, not all. Do you all have any type of not a precaution, but let's just say if they are awarded this grant, are there any type of training programs, job programs to help them? You know, you give a man the fish to eat for a day, you teach him the fish to eat for a lifetime. Any type of programs that you have in place that can say, okay, we helped you this time, you know, but you're required to take a 4-week course on money management.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Right now, I said right now, no, because we're relatively speaking too small to implement to have sort of like that kind of a robust program. Two is we've actually shied away from doing that because, you know, our political feeling is that if you need the support, we want to give you the support, right?
Right.
And we know as it's somewhat of a like a one-shot effort, but we also try to arm them with other places that they can go to get additional resources if they need it. And sometimes we haven't given some resources if we feel that it won't be enough to save them from the particular situation they're in. So if their mortgage is backed up to like $5,000, us giving $500, this ain't going to help, right? But we're still trying to figure out how to sort of interject those kind of training programs, because we're not a social service agency per se. We're more of a political organizing group that's decided to do this as an additional project or on the additional project on the work that we want to do. So for us, it's about working with those folks, getting them in the door and trying to work with them. But again, I think things may develop differently as time goes on and as we become potentially a bigger organization.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I had a question. Hi, I'm Dr. Tasha Davis. I have an organization called Save One Life Foundation in Chicago. And what really brought to light when you were speaking is our most recent initiatives are focused around getting the community to invest in themselves and teaching them that. And so buying back the block, everybody's hollering buying back the block. But that's a difficult thing to do with no idea of how to acquire these properties, get these properties fixed up, maintain them, and then keep them with taxes, the whole works. Because otherwise, those families that live in those neighborhoods would have probably done that by now. So a lot of the Black communities in Chicago, mostly on the west and south side, suffer less from gentrification and more from white flight, meaning like all the money is just left the neighborhoods. It's a lot of blight and a lot of underserved going on. So now you have police brutality, and now they want to defund the police, but the government, the mayor, the county, all of them sound like they're hands-on now for ideas. And one that as I work with this group, we've been working in agriculture, and this summer we're starting peace gardens around different low-income neighborhoods around Chicago. And we're working with youth. And so as we're introducing entrepreneurial ideas, I want to teach that idea of the co-op to them. And I want that idea to become even a co-op in their peace garden. So if you own a little raised bed and I own a raised bed and we have 15 raised beds on one lot, we're investing in this lot as a community, as a co-op of ownership. And so I want to take that idea immediately and start enforcing it in everything we do. I mean, tomorrow we're going out to feed 500 families, and that's the message I want to share for the community, but we have to do it in a language they can understand. And so I just wanted to know, what do you recommend? How do we get started in doing that? Even as a nonprofit, I don't want to no longer just start working in places. We want to get a building that our nonprofit owns, and we want to build businesses out of that. And so I wonder, how do you recommend we get started with the co-op idea? That is so important when we're talking about buying back blocks, sharing property together. And that is probably the only way we can really get ownership of these properties. The second thing I want to ask you is, I know Cook County has a land bank, and I think that's the first place we should start asking government for is donation of those properties and lands back to the community. even in Atlanta, I have been looking. I think you all, I don't know if it's Fulton County Land Bank. It's a land bank in Atlanta, in Southwest Atlanta, I think, that I have been looking at and trying to just spread the word that we should start there with donation of that. And especially if you come in, like you said, the managing people, having a nonprofit managing, because taxes is going to be a big deal with these properties and that land. And so having a managing company that's like a nonprofit, which we are, and I assume you are, I don't know if we could manage it until they get ownership of the whole co-op and then turn it over. But I definitely would like your advice on much all of that.
So I'm going to start with the land bank, because that's stuck in my head first. So the land bank obviously is one of the central places where the city itself or county takes land that has title issues and dumps it all in one place and cleans up title. Unfortunately, in Atlanta, the land bank here does that. They clean up title. What they usually do is hold on to the land until there's a larger development idea, which again is a larger corporate development idea. One of the things that we are working on is trying to force the land bank, and they also will sell. They'll sell to developers, right? So they, courthouse steps. They're selling individual homes. We're trying to force the land bank to do something like what you're talking about, and it's called land, and to take this vacant property and put it into land trust, right? So the idea of a land trust, as folks may already know, is that the structure on top is purchased, but the land is held in commons, right? So that means the land is held by a community organization of some kind that should have the community organization should be run by people from that community. There's some land trusts which are citywide or bigger, and they claim to be doing this, but really they have some of the same corporate heads that are running those land trusts. And so the people in the community never really actually have control over that property. And that's not the kind of land trust we think is good for, again, making sure we as a people own and develop property and industry in our communities. White folks, again, that have been doing things similar to this and have land trusts that are owned by some of their neighborhood associations. And so that's another way to approach it. Neighborhood associations that collect dues or fees or can start sort of special funds, they can little by little sort of save up enough money and try to figure out a way to actually purchase property little by little. The land trust is a bigger, more sweeping idea if you can go to the city and get them to give 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces of land to organizations. We have not been successful in that because of our radical politics. Other more benign organizations, read that as in having white leadership, have been able to get property from the city itself, and larger foundations have been able to get property and buy it cheap and redevelop them. So those are some of the challenges. But I think using the idea of either the neighborhood association and or challenging the land bank to turn over property into a land trust is a organizing campaign in and of itself, one that can be strategic, that can lead to getting properties owned by local folks. And it's hard for people to argue against that, right? It's just more like, can you get the structure together, people who have the skill level to help run it, and then it's not even so hard to run, because basically it's people who are managing property. And or it's owned, again, the property itself is owned by the individual, so they have the same rights and concerns as any homeowner, but when they want to sell, it keeps a cap on the sale price. So this doesn't work for property that's already owned by somebody, because no one's going to really put their home, most people won't put their home in a land trust because they'll lose value. But for property that needs to be redeveloped in some way, that's kind of the strategy that's the best to use. If it's not owned by anybody, if taxes, and so no one is living there currently, if those properties can be developed into a land trust, it immediately stabilizes property values in that larger community, and it stops gentrification because people feel like they can't get comparable prices when they sell, and it keeps communities more stable because there's a collective ownership over property in the larger community. And people have done that not only with individual homes, for parks, recreation centers. And so, the challenge, of course, for poor class neighborhoods is like what you said. Buy the block it sounds like a great idea, but unless you have a way to get people to put resources in that are enough resources to actually purchase property, And of course, a place like Chicago, Atlanta, even, property, a single house can be $150,000, right? So you're raising 10, 15, 20,000. Then you got to have a bank that's willing to give you a loan for the rest of it. That's not easy to do. So challenging the city itself to give vacant properties over to a larger community effort, and to challenging banks who have excess property. And a lot of times these banks don't want the property, right? They don't want that headache. They want their payments. And so challenging them for either redlining or giving disingenuous mortgage loans at higher rates to Black communities and so forth. That was something that helped. That people did right after the Great Recession a few years ago, that actually got banks to turn over properties to local community folks in certain places. So you should study land banks and some of the organizing ideas on getting that property turned over to folks in the community in some sort of collective fashion. I also say, in terms of developing cooperatives, that's also a slow process, because basically a cooperative is a business formation, right? It is the idea of developing a business. Some people think on the left, which I'm part of the left community, people who have like left strategies and so forth, they like the idea of cooperatives, but they don't have any business experience. And so cooperatives for them turn into just another meeting, right? And so if you're not developing a product that actually can make a profit, whether or not however you spend that profit, then you're just adding another meeting to your template. So when people think about these cooperative structures, these cooperative business structures, you still have to think along the lines of what are we going to be able to produce, that we are going to be able to sell, that we're going to be able to get revenue, and that our expenses are going to be less than what our revenue is, so that we can actually have a business that we can expand and then show people some of those ideas around the skill level of business ownership. But for me, even more important than that is that it moves away from the idea of capitalist enterprise, where you're just Horatio Alger story, you're an individual and you're going to make it rich and leave your community, right? A better method for us, this is obviously an ideological position, is that, there's not going to be enough of us who are going to be able to do that. We need to develop the communities that we're in before somebody else tries to take them over, right? So I think developing cooperatives is, and talking about them as that idea of us collectively doing it together. Fannie Lou Hamer developed cooperatives as part of her work in Mississippi, the freedom struggle. And so we have to depend on some of the historical analogies. And there's many Black co-ops. As folks know, Black churches did insurance cooperatives right before desegregation, funeral home cooperatives, things that were owned by the church and owned by some part of the congregation in the church. And these are the things that helped sustain the Black community during a time when capital was limited, right? So we dashed away from that. I'm not saying we're going to be able to duplicate those kind of processes, but there is things to be learned around how we build businesses and strategies with a little bit of fun. Even looking at the UNIA, Marcus Garvey, individual donations led to the ability to buy bigger structures. So it's all about how we are able to collect those funds, the trust we develop with folks, the openness of the accounting, so that people know that their money is going to go towards ABC, and the next week whoever's doing is not, driving a brand new car. All that stuff matters because our people have been fooled and bamboozled and all that kind of stuff. So we have to develop that trust. Like you said, develop those small projects that develop more trust, and then develop those ideas that we think are going to bring in some revenue that are going to help our community in a larger fashion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we got about 15 more minutes. I know a lot of us got to run at 7. Anybody else have a question?
I don't have a question, but I'd just like to say something. That was a great question that Dr. Tasha answered. I did have something to ask, but it was answered. So that was a very thorough answer that was given and a great question. Thank you very much. A lot to follow up on after that. Thank you.
So we are in the prime of that right now. Like literally, there is an activist in Chicago called Jamal Green, and he's going around right now shutting down every Chase bank on the west side and south side of Chicago, looking at how much money they loan to like up north, they loaned $900 million from 2012 to now for home ownership, but they only loaned $1 million to the south and west side of Chicago. And so as you talk about they're looking for reparations, but they better come with some demands. And one demand I heard come from you would have been unload those homes that they're sitting on that are foreclosed on, that are on their books to us. That could be one of them. But I think I just really need to know, where should we start? I really believe if we ask Cook County for our homes here in Chicago, aren't $150,000 that are in these neighborhoods. These homes are $10,000, $20,000. These lots are $3,500 and no more than $5,000.
Well, let's talk afterwards. I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but let's talk afterwards, because I would even offer to do some joint work with you.
Yes.
If there's houses for $10,000, I can do joint work with you about how we can raise some of those resources. And again, I mean, it's similar to what we did, or again, we had someone who donated, but once you are able to show that you can do this once,
capacity,
you can do it again, and then people can see that this is an organization that's going to be here for a while and not fly by night. So I would just, after we're finished, maybe Gabriel can give you my email or my phone number, and we can have a longer conversation about sort of doing maybe some joint work, or me just giving, even sharing some resources in the short term that you could, like, we could put you on a payment plan and pay it back at some point. But if that's what a house costs out there, and it's relatively in decent condition, we should figure that out, because I think that's prime to do land trust with. I just assumed, because it was Chicago, that there's going to be low, like, New York, you can't do that no matter what you buy.
The better the neighborhood, the more the house. But the neighborhoods I'm talking about, they don't want that. They don't want those homes. Most likely those homes won't ever even get bought back again.
No, let's talk, because I think knowing that's really important in terms of sort of, and another thing I was going to say quickly, like, we have to create a model that people can see. Right. It doesn't have to be a huge model, but it's got to be something that people see, and they can see the expectation of it getting bigger, and they can see something that's an alternative to what's happening, because we've heard the rhetoric already from folks. We need to see some alternative models that look like, oh, now I see what you mean, right? I think that's big.
Yeah. And on top of that, it's a lot of funding right now, even for this whole group. We've been talking and working together, grant writing and trying to get funding for some of our projects. But food security has been a big issue in Black communities. And that's kind of how we all came together. And with John, we have been all trying to get agricultural innovation center. Well, that's part of the corporate buildings that are free as well right now to be bought in these same neighborhoods as the houses and the land. They're in a Cook County land bank, commercial buildings as well. So let's talk. And I think, we got grand ideas, but I wouldn't even mind starting very small with one lot and one house, just to get the template right. So other organizations, because I don't want to carry all of the communities of Chicago. There's other organizations like me who work heavily in their neighborhoods. If they learn how to do this, it's really about showing the way, and then they can take over from there. So if you can help keep the template, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
That's fine.
Yeah, really great points, guys. Excellent job. Kamau, are you okay with me putting your information in the chat area so people can contact you?
No, not a problem whatsoever. Yeah, that's great.
Okay. I'm gonna put it in there. So it should be in the chat area, just so we have it for those who can't see the chat. His nonprofit is Community Movement Builders, headquartered in Atlanta, but he's got other chapters in other states. His email is kamaufranklin@gmail.com. Any other ways that people can contact you, Kamau?
You can put my cell number, 917-535-3041.
917-535, what was the last part?
3041.
All right, I just put it in the chat. Great.
You got it. Put it back in the chat, please. I'm sorry. Put it back in the chat. It's on private.
Oh, my bad. Yep, I see that. Thank you.
Welcome.
Great questions, guys. And Kamau, you've been an outstanding guest speaker, so I really appreciate you coming on board and enlightening our folks here. A lot of people that we usually see on this meeting are not here, but hopefully they can get this recording and benefit from what you've been talking about. So really appreciate that. Oh, the project director is back on. All right, John, you have any other?
No, I've been here listening the whole time. I just, enjoying being a spectator for once. So, but you guys did an excellent job, Kamau. We've been talking for the past couple of weeks. Like I said, I think that what you're doing is awesome, and I'm looking forward to working with you. I'm sure that there's going to be quite a few others over here who are going to be just as eager to do it. We normally put this on our network and everything else, and so we have individuals who will see this later, and so they will. So you may be getting also calls from them.
Okay.
So
thank you guys.
Appreciate
you. All right.
No, appreciate you.
All right. Peace.
All right, great. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and close out for the evening. I think there's another call that some of y'all might be interested in. It's the Black Farmers networking call. And let me see. I want to pull it up in my chat.
Hold on. Yeah, while I was listening to you guys, I was sending that information now. So let me. Okay. I got it right here, and I'll put it in the chat if I can get it to get big enough for me to read it. So two.
By the way, this is a call-in call. This is not a Zoom call. It's a call-in call. Is it a Zoom meeting? I thought
no, it's. I think it's a phone call.
Yeah. Okay.
Is anybody have theirs on them? Because I'm trying to.
I got it.
I think I got it right. I can't tell if that's a 9484, if that's
94. Oh, you're right. That's a 9464.
64. Okay.
Yes. 602-580-9464, and the code is 824809. Happening at 7 p.m. It's the Black Farmers Conference call.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's in the chat.
All right. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, Quinn, good job. I didn't have my glasses on, so I couldn't see it. So yeah, that's a good thing. Like I said, I was trying to make sure that all that information was going out while I was listening to the call. But Gabe, you did an excellent job. You guys are gonna make it tough for to me and myself. And when our turn comes around, you and Chef Joseph Darrell over there, y'all been raising the stakes. So really appreciate you guys stepping up and doing this. So this is what it's all about. All of us working together, all of us taking that opportunity and moving up from there. So appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right. So are we good?
Yeah, we're good. Unless anybody has any questions. TJ, you've been pretty quiet. Deborah, I think I've seen some of your chat questions. If you didn't get them all answered, you can always reach out to Kamau through email if you need be.
Yeah. So I'm hoping everybody got Kamau's information on there. If not, I'll try to make sure that I put it in the video so that you guys can be able to deal with that also.
Fantastic. All right. Well, appreciate your time, and I will see some of y'all on the next call.
All right.
All right. Peace, y'all. Peace and love.
Thank you.
Out.